Today, we're going to perform something like a psychological autopsy on an entire generation. We're diving deep into the Millennial Paradox, exploring the unique pressures, the contradictions, and the reality that shaped them. Wow. I mean, this quote just nails it, right? It gets right to the heart of the whole thing. It's this massive contradiction that so many people born between about 1981 and 1996 feel deep in their bones. This feeling that you're running faster than anyone before you, only to keep falling further and further behind. So, yeah, what happened? How did a generation that was raised on all these promises of limitless potential wind up here? That is the big question, and that's what we're going to unpack.
Okay, so let's start by getting one thing straight. This isn't just a feeling, It's not just a collection of anecdotes from the internet. This is a documented economic reality, a true generational paradox.
And here is the fact that underpins it all, confirmed by places like the Pew Research Center. For the first time in modern history, a generation is actually on track to be worse off financially than their parents were. That is a huge deal. It's like the fundamental promise of progress. The idea that if you work hard, your kids will have it better, it just broke. Now, that's the external reality. But what's really fascinating is what happens inside your head when that reality hits. It creates this unique and incredibly stressful psychological cocktail. And there's a perfect term for the main ingredient here: cognitive dissonance. It's that awful, grinding mental stress you feel when you hold two completely contradictory ideas at the same time. And for millennials, they're practically swimming in it. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. On the left, you've got the sunny promises they grew up with. You can be anything, just work hard. And on the right, you have the stormy reality they actually walked into: recessions, crippling debt, and an economy that just didn't play by those old rules. This conflict created such a bizarre internal state. There's this researcher, Jean Twenge, who found that because millennials were told they were special, they scored higher on narcissism scales. But that same generation facing that harsh reality also saw record-breaking levels of anxiety and depression. Think about that. It's the feeling of being simultaneously special and totally worthless. I just love this quote. It is such a perfect 21st century way to describe it. A polished, professional, everything is fine exterior on LinkedIn, masking this deep, underlying stress response to a world that feels completely unstable. So how in the world did we get here? Well, this psychological state wasn't born in a vacuum. It was forged in a series of massive, back-to-back crises and societal shifts. I mean, talk about generational whiplash. First, you're raised in the everyone gets a trophy self-esteem movement, which builds these sky-high expectations. Then, bam, the 2008 recession hits right as you're trying to start your career, completely shattering those expectations. And then, layered over all of it, you have the rise of social media, which basically teaches you to perform a perfect version of your life for an audience, 24/7. The pressure is just immense. All of these forces together have led to this unique phenomenon for the generation, a kind of prolonged, delayed adulthood, this sense that you're just waiting for your real life to finally begin. And there's actually a clinical term for the physical price of all this chronic uncertainty. It's called allostatic load. It's the literal wear and tear on your body from being in a constant low-level state of fight or flight, always braced for a stability that never quite seems to arrive. Forget the clinical term for a second, because this analogy just says it all. You're doing everything you were told to do, but the progress bar is just stuck. It's not moving. You're trapped in the waiting room of your own future. And if you're wondering what's freezing that loading screen, well, here's a big, concrete piece of the puzzle: $80,000. That's the average student loan debt for a millennial who got a master's degree. A number like that makes traditional goals like buying a house feel like a total fantasy. This leads to another really crucial psychological concept: schema disruption. That's the fancy term for what happens when the fundamental rules you were taught to believe in, like effort equals outcome, are just proven false over and over by your own life. It forces you to completely rewire how you see the world. And that psychological rewiring is so important because it's often mislabeled. What some older generations might look at and call entitlement is actually something else entirely. It's adaptation. Let's just take job hopping. Millennials get so much criticism for it, but look at this slide. They entered a world where that old social contract of company loyalty was already torn to shreds. Companies got rid of pensions and long-term stability first, so job hopping isn't disloyalty, it's a perfectly rational survival strategy in a totally unstable market. But here's the thing. When you're forged in that kind of fire, you develop some pretty incredible and often overlooked strengths. They became the most educated generation in history. They grew up online, so they developed some seriously sharp critical thinking skills to navigate it. And maybe most importantly, they're the generation that dragged the conversation about mental health out of the dark and destigmatized it for all of us. So you've got all the personal pressure, all the economic pressure, and then, just to top it all off, there's one more layer of stress that feels uniquely sharp for this generation. Just the existential dread about tomorrow. It's gotten so common, it even has a name now, climate anxiety. And it's a real, legitimate psychological phenomenon. I mean, just imagine trying to plan for a 30-year mortgage while you're also reading headlines about the long-term habitability of the planet. It's an enormous psychological weight for a generation that inherited these huge global problems with very little power to fix them. Which brings us right back to that question, the one that's so often thrown at this generation, sometimes dismissively, sometimes with real confusion. After everything we've just walked through, that question almost sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? So here it is. Here's the most crucial takeaway. The anxiety, the job hopping, the delayed life milestones. These aren't character flaws. They aren't signs of a broken generation. They are the predictable, logical, human responses to living in a world where the rulebook was ripped up right in front of you. And really, that leaves us with the ultimate question. It's not about what's wrong with millennials. It's about their resilience. When you are handed a map that no longer matches the territory you're standing in, the challenge isn't to follow it, it's to find the courage to draw a new one. And how this generation continues to do that, well, that's going to define all of our futures.